Hi, and welcome to A Victorious Life and Outreach Teaching Ministry, located here in the beautiful city of Roses, Tyler, Texas. I'm your host, Lori Stimson Ortega, and as always, I want to say welcome to the show. You know what? The cameraman and I, prior to the start of the show, we were talking about the viewership numbers, and we are excited about it appears that the numbers are steadily increasing. So we want to say thank you. And as always, we pray that something will be said to strengthen and encourage your walk with Christ. My announcements for today. First of all, any lesson that you miss, feel free to hit us up on YouTube. We have every lesson has been published there. Is that the word you use? Published?
Yeah.
Okay. Uploaded. Yeah. Okay. Every lesson has been uploaded onto our YouTube channel from, I think it was January of 2015. So I'm not as YouTube literate as I should be, but I'm thinking maybe at some point some of that may need to archive. Will it archive itself?
It's there. It'll
okay.
Never go away.
Okay. As soon as you said that, I was like a deer in hell. Huh?
unless you delete your channel,
okay.
Those videos are there until the end of time.
Infinity and beyond. Okay. That's like powerful. So I guess it's true that whatever you put on the internet, the scrapbook of the world, the television of the world. Okay. Well, you heard it from someone who's YouTube literate, because he's the person who uploads them. But I did want to say that, because sometimes people will say, well, I missed the lesson, or I missed, the show. And when you go on to I think the YouTube channel, you can subscribe, and it will automatically upload.
It will give you
notification. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. See, God puts people in our lives to help us to be better and cut out the ignorance and in some cases stupidity. So I do encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, because I want to say that you upload them. Now, we pre-tape the show, so usually it goes in about 2 days prior to the airing. Like, it's airing Sunday. The show is actually uploaded, I think, on a Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, and I think it uploads automatically to YouTube like that Saturday. Right?
No, once it's up, I upload it on Friday, and it's there.
Oh, okay. And you would get, so if you subscribed, you'd get a
notification.
Yeah, see, now we're cooking with hot grease. Subscribe. Get it, get the sale before the sale. Get the monies off before they put the signs up. So I wanted to make that announcement. I also wanted to make the announcement, I think those of you who have been coming out to the pop-up Bible study, we have 2 more sessions. We have this session, and then we have tonight, and then next Sunday night. And then we're going to take like a week break, because during spring break, of course, we don't want to do anything as a courtesy. And then we'll pop up somewhere else. But they have been most kind and most gracious and most generous at La Madelines, that I kind of like being there. And because I do not know the management by name, but I will put in an unsolicited and unpaid advertisement for them. If you like French food, check them out. Okay, and their hospitality and their courtesy, their customer service is amazing. Now, it takes sometimes a little bit longer because it is prepared, the food is prepared fresh. But those are all of the announcements. Oh, one more. The Villa service. For those of you that have been coming out to the Sunday and calling about the Villa services, that's the senior service, we are going to postpone those until May. And the reason being, with the flu bug and weather, changes to weather, I really don't want the seniors walking out on walkers and canes and all of those things, trying to fight the weather. And I'm also aware that their immune systems are really low. So attendance has dropped, Mr. Cameraman, for the Sunday evening or the Sunday senior service. And after speaking with some of them, they're afraid of of coming out to catch that they're going to catch the flu. And a lot of did you know a lot of doctors have also told them to just kind of don't travel or go anywhere unnecessarily because their immune systems are low. So that's what we want. That's what we want to do. Just showing up and there's nobody there, that's not going to benefit anybody. And then it's going to make them, put them in a situation where they're going to feel obligated to try to come out. So those of you that have been attending the senior service at the villas, who do not live in that facility, or who live in that facility and have been, calling or trying to come out and everything, we're postponing that until May. We're going to let the Texas heat kill some of these germs before we come back out. All right. How many minutes do I have? How many did I use? I'm trying to get better with it. Okay. I need to get that down to 4. And yeah. All right. Today we're going to be coming from John chapter 11. And when I said verses 1 through 44 to the cameraman, he's like, are we going to get through all of those? I assure you, no, we're not going to get through all 44 of those verses. That's the background. Those are the background passages or background verses that after the show goes off, if you want to, or this week, your homework for this week is to read chapter 11, verses 1 through 44. But this lesson is going to focus on chapter 11, verse 32, and then 37 through 44. So we're only going to look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 verses. Now, on last week, we talked about My Hope Has a Name, or Hope Has a Name. And we talked about those three challenges. And the first challenge from last week was, don't be so quick to follow everybody. Stop following people. Stop just listening to any and everybody. The second challenge was, wrangle in those excuses. Stop making unnecessary excuses. And the third one is walk in the power of God. Allow yourself to recognize when He's creating opportunities in your life. See Him working in your life and see Him working in your situation. Recognize when He's working in you and when He's working through you. Recognize when you're being used by Him in a particular situation, even if it appears to be negative, because we have hope. Hope is not like a chance. And I think we did a pretty good job of Mr. Cameron of on that lesson on last week. I know I enjoyed teaching it. So now we're just going to build on that. If we're talking about no more excuses and walking in the power of God and allowing yourself to be used by Him. If we're talking about stop following everybody and listening to any and everybody, then on this week, we're going to talk about how to navigate when you feel hopeless. Okay, so we'll just call this when you feel, or what, I don't want to say hope for the hopeless, but when you feel hopeless. And then if you can put some little dots next, 3 dots or periods or what have you, to give the appearance of thought. I think we've all been in or have experienced the feeling of hopelessness and helplessness. And those two, hopeless is different from helpless. And sometimes if we're not careful, we will merge those two words together and come up with the singular definition of the word hopeless. But helpless is totally different than hopeless. Helpless means that you've reached that point where you have 2 options. You could do it for yourself, but for reasons unknown, you choose not to. You choose, because some people choose to be helpless. Does that make sense to you? They choose, they have all the tools that they need to be successful, but they choose to remain in, like we said, a dysfunctional situation. So they choose to continue to be or present themselves as helpless. Now that's one area. Then there's another area of helpless that means you don't have any help. Nobody can help you at all. And that's the definition that we want you we want you to focus on those two interpretations of the word helpless. But then we want to insert this other word, hopeless. Hopeless means when you look at a situation and it is beyond your control, when you've lost faith, when you've lost courage, when you've lost your will to believe and to think and to trust that it's going to be okay. So when you look at hopeless, helpless, and then helpless, then when we get to John chapter 11, verse 32, and for time, because I really want to get through all of it, I'm going to read some of the scriptures and then kind of paraphrase. Now, when you get to John chapter 11, verse 32, and I think this is coming from the Christian Standard Bible, CSB Bible, it reads, "As soon as Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and told him, 'Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.'" Now, I want to kind of back up and give you some background. Now, we know everybody watching the show, I'm sure you are avid Bible readers and Bible scholars. So I'm going to talk to those who have never heard this story presented. Now, prior to this incident, Jesus was in another city with the disciples. So when the news of the death of Lazarus got to him, he did not automatically leave or stop what he was doing to go pray for Lazarus or to go, be with that family. Really, he didn't go pray for him to be healed. All right. Now, so the word got to him, got to Jesus, and Jesus basically, after he got the word, he said, well, okay, and he cried, right? Now, when he cried, it was that indication that it was a sign of his humanity, even though he was, a divinity, because he laid his life down. He never laid down his divinity. All right. So he cried because he felt the emotion of loss. He felt hurt. He felt grief. He grieved because, that was news he did not want to hear. So Jesus faced the negative news of death the way we as everyday ordinary people, we feel the same way. When we hear that someone close to us or someone that we care about, when they die, we cry, we feel hurt, we feel empty, we feel lost. So Jesus cried, but you know what he didn't do? He didn't automatically leave to, hey, let's go see about Lazarus, or let me go pray for Lazarus. No, he heard that Lazarus had died. And once he heard Lazarus had died again, he wept. So instead of him leaving right away, he waited. So we come into the story where he's shown up, and not only has Lazarus died, but Lazarus has also been buried. He's gone through the process of, he's been funeralized. He's had his homegoing service, and he is now encased in a tomb. He is entombed in a rock or what have you, however and wherever they laid him. So when he comes to town, he gets to the city or to the town. He as he's coming in, Mary comes up to him and she says to him, "You know what? If you would have been here, my brother, Lazarus, he would not have died." So she was saying in her own way, she was trying to comfort herself. But then there's that underlying part that she was still trying to protect, that part of her that did not want to accept that Jesus possibly could have gotten there in time so Lazarus wouldn't have to die. Okay. And when I say he possibly could have gotten there in time, he could have gotten there in her mind. We sent word. He got the word. they went back and told him, hey, yes, we told him. So maybe by that time Lazarus was sick. Okay. And so then by the time he came, and maybe Lazarus was dead for like a day, but Jesus didn't show up on day 1. He didn't show up on day 2. He didn't show up on day 3. Well, now it's day 4, and they cannot keep, they couldn't keep him out like James Brown. They couldn't just keep him out for months on end. They could only keep him out for 1 day because of their culture. So when we get to verse 37, it says, but some of them said, couldn't he who opened the blind man's eyes also have kept this man from dying? All right. Now, this is something that's interesting, because when you read through, in your reading for this week, when you get to when you read through John chapter 11, verses 1 through 44, you're going to read where Martha said to Jesus, you know what, if you would have been here, he would not have died. But Martha didn't fall on her knees like Jesus, like Mary. Martha was kind of upset. Martha was disappointed. So what she allowed herself to be disappointed. So when Jesus, when she saw, she's like, you know what, if you would have been here, he would not have died. But you are God, and we know that all things work together. And I'm paraphrasing that, her response. But in everyday language, that's really how she said it. It was the manner in which she said it, because she did say the same thing that Mary said, but in a different manner. She was blunt. Hey, if you would have been here, he would not have died. So she came at him the way, if we're not careful, when we are disappointed, when we're upset, when we're frustrated, we're going to come at people in a different manner, and we're going to expect them to feel and think the way that we feel, and think and everything should be pressing, because it's pressing to us. It should be pressing to them. And so when she said, if you would have been here, she was putting the blame on him, on Jesus. She was placing the blame of Lazarus' death on Jesus. She was not placing Lazarus' death on, maybe he was in poor health, maybe he was older, maybe he had some underlying health concerns that nobody knew about. She didn't say anything positive about Lazarus' situation prior to him passing away. You don't even know how Lazarus got sick. Lazarus could have been sick for months, weeks. He could have been sick for, 2 or 3 days. But we'll never know that. But the way she came at Jesus, she was disappointed, she was frustrated, and she was hurt. And she said to him, like so many of us say to him when we're hurt, when we're frustrated, when we're disappointed, when we feel like we're in hopeless situations, when we feel helpless, we'll say, hey, look, God, I thought that you were going to be here for me. I thought you told me to do this and I did this. You told me to do that. I did that. I thought you were going to be here for me, but you weren't. You weren't here for me. And you know what ends up happening? We do exactly like Martha does. And then we try to clean it up like Martha. We try to say, but you know what, God? Whatever you have planned for my life, I accept it. And we do our look of piousness and humility, and we just sit there and we hold our hands like this, as if we're waiting for him to grab our hands and say, okay, my child, I've got you now. And sometimes it doesn't work like that. And it doesn't work like that because of our attitude, the attitude that how we presented our situation to him. We become like Martha. If you would have did this, I wouldn't be in this situation. If you would have done this, we wouldn't have to do this. And we approach God like that. And in our prayers and in our verbal conversations with him, that when we get frustrated, when you get frustrated, you start talking out loud to yourself. And sometimes there's nothing wrong with speaking out loud to yourself, but sometimes you try to do that and you smack in Jesus' name on the end. And that prayer was riddled with nothing but attitude. So that's what Martha did. Martha said, if you would have been here, he would not have died. But I know that, hey, you're God and you've got everything under control. And that's the first lesson, that first point that I want to make. How do you approach, how do you approach prayer? What is your attitude when you're praying? Do you really give it all to the Lord in prayer? Do I took it all? There's a song, I put it all in his hands. Okay, do you really put it all in his hands? Or do you just kind of put a little bit in his hands, and then like giving candy to a baby, you go back and you just, okay, here it is, no, take it back, here it is, take it back, because that's going to determine the outcome. It's going to determine how you approach the situation. Are you approaching it as helpless or helpless, hopeless? Okay. And I know that sounds confusing, because when Martha and Mary said to Jesus, hey, if you would have been here, he would not have died, they were basically operating from that first definition that we gave you for helpless. There were some things that they could have done, maybe not to spare Lazarus's life, because they did not have the power of life and death in their hands or in their tongues, as the word said. They didn't have that. They could not speak life, the restoration of life back to Lazarus. They didn't have that power, but they were operating from that first level of helplessness, the mentality of, okay, you know what? I did all that I can do. But even in my doing all that I can do, the reason it didn't happen for me is because somebody else is holding it up. So until they do their part, there's nothing I can do. And I submit to you, there was still something that they could do. Number one, they did right, send word to Jesus. But when Jesus showed up, there was no reason for if you would have been here. No, it should have been, well, he's here now. This is when we need him now, because he shows up in some of our most trying, hopeless life experiences. He shows up. The conditions, does that sound mean? I don't want to make it sound like God is just so distant and so, so disinterested in humanity that the condition has to be real good and messed up for him to show up. I don't want to give that impression, because I don't believe that. What I believe is he meets us where we are. If we're in a positive situation, he's there. If we're in a negative situation, he's there. But usually when the situations are positive, because they're positive, we're not focusing on him. So we don't see his hand, if we don't stop and take the time to realize, hey, wait, his hand is working and operating in my life and through my life. If we don't stop to take the time to see that, then we will only think that, hey, he's showing up when it's negative. It's got to be real good and messed up. And I'm not, again, that's what I believe. I believe God is working in our lives, through our lives, positive, negative. He works through it because he meets us where we are. So, excuse me. So in this situation, what she should have done, as the challenge is for us, when we are faced with situations that seem beyond our control, let's not take that first definition of self-helplessness where we've got to blame, I'm in this situation because you didn't do this for me, meaning God, you didn't do, because God didn't do this for me, I'm not going to be able to do this. I can't do it. If he doesn't help me, I can't do this. That's the wrong mentality from a spiritual standpoint. That's the wrong approach to take. Now, they were helpless. What they should have done and what we should do is, at the moment, things are not turning out in our lives the way that they should turn. Instead of us passing blame and fussing and yelling and screaming at people, the first thing we need to do is stop and say, okay, Lord, I do not see how you are working in this situation. Help me to see how you are working. Lord, I thank you for working on my behalf. I thank you. It is going to work it's going to work out. It's going to work out for my good. If it's not for my good, I thank you for removing it. I thank you for changing my mentality. I thank you for giving me clarity. I thank you for helping me to be better. And I don't know how it's going to turn out. I can't see it. I can't see what's going to happen, but I can feel that you are with me, that you're not going to fail me. You're not going to let me down. And I will give you praise. I will continue to honor you and glorify you. And I will be satisfied with whatever decision you make, because you are my God and you have my best interest at heart. Now, that's how we should approach those hopeless situations when we feel like there's no hope. You know, when we feel hopeless, that's the first thing that we do is we've got to stop, isolate ourselves, and communicate through prayer with God. We've got to communicate. We've got to call like this. You got to call on Jesus. You've got to say, you know, Lord, I don't understand this. But we don't have the right to say, you said you was going to do this, and you said you would be here for me, and you said you was going to. No, because God is not like man. You can't approach him the way that you approach individuals. Now, when we do that, it's step one. When we stop and we isolate ourselves and we pray and we pray a prayer of sincerity, a prayer that, hey, I need help, I need understanding. Just gave you an example of how to approach it from a standpoint of prayer. Then the second thing we need to do is look at ourselves. Okay, am I helpless because there's something that I have not done? Am I helpless because there's something that I have not taken care of? You know, Mr. Cameraman, I want to admit to this. You know, I live in the home that I grew up in, and you know, it's a blessing. You know, it's a blessing. And I was talking to my brother, and I said, I really want a new home. I said, but the longer I stay here, the older I get, I'm just going to fix what needs to be fixed and just live so I can do some other things that I want to do. And when I hung the phone up, before I hung the phone up, he said, well, okay, Laura, he said, I'm going to tell you, I love you. He said, but if you decide to do that, he said, our parents always had a beautiful yard. And he said, when I come to visit and I see that there's no grass, just ground cover in the yard, he's like, that just breaks my heart. And I said, you know what? I said, you are so right. I said, the only reason we did not put out grass last year, or even, last year, I said, because I was dead set on moving. And I said, but since I'm at peace with staying, I said, yes, most definitely, grass will be up before March. I said, I'm putting grass out there before March. And when I hung up the phone, Mr. Cameron, I actually went and walked the yard. And I had to repent and take ownership, because it's not a helpless situation. The Lord didn't have nothing to do with no grass growing out. The Lord didn't have anything to do with the dead flowers that were in the flower pots. Now, the weather had something to do with, me not wanting to put out, new flowers for them to die. But I'm like, Lord, I apologize. I take ownership for not being a good steward over something as simple as grass and plants. I apologize for that, because you know what? It takes that same intensity and that same fervency to be appreciative and thankful for what he's blessed you with, as it does for the stuff you're believing him to give you. So here I am. Lord, I thank you. You're going to bless us with a brand new house. I thank you. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. And I give you praise. And Lord, I thank you. Well, look around. You're technically in a new house. He paid to have it gutted, So the stuff, don't be helpless. Don't try to present yourself hopeless. You can buy grass on your own. You work every day. You can buy plants on your own. You can keep the yard manicured and change out the fencing. You can do a lot of that stuff on your own. So when we look at this, there were some things that they could not do on their own. They couldn't restore life back to Lazarus. No, but they could thank God for his life. They could thank God for allowing him to go peacefully, or for them to be a part of his life, for them to be there as he transitioned. So when we get to verse 37, there are always some naysayers and haters, as they say. And I don't really teach on haters, because I figure, sometimes when people don't like you, it's a benefit to make you better. Okay, so the more people don't like you, I'll be 50 years old, Mr. Cameron. More people I find out, I don't really care for you. Okay, well, that's good. That means less energy. I have less energy, time, and finances that I have to focus on, trying to hang out. So when you look at this, it lets us know, and I want to say this about the people that were there. First of all, the people that were there, that they were surrounded by, it was really what God was about to do for Lazarus and for Martha, and in Martha and Mary's lives. It was really not about Lazarus, Martha, and Mary. It was about these people from verse 37 that just said, okay, look, he opening up blinded eyes, but he can't keep nobody from dying. The hecklers and the haters, Mr. Cameraman, the naysayers and the negativity crew, they were in the crowd too. So everybody at a funeral is not necessarily there to honor the dead. Sometimes they are there to see what they can see and get what they can get. They're there, and sometimes to get what they can get is a plate of food and some attention. Because you ever notice that, Mr. Cameron, you go to a funeral, they'll have the people that are going to the designated singers, and when they open it up for remarks, I just want to sing, this was his favorite song, her favorite song, I just want to sing an excerpt. It's like, no, this is not The Voice. This is not about you. No, we don't want to hear you sing. If you're not on the program, don't sing. You should have been going to church with him or her and letting them let you sing at their own venue. So when these people said, hey, he's opened a blind man's eyes, but he can't, couldn't stop somebody from dying. It was, that there was about to be a throwdown at the playground, because it was more about those individuals and less about Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, which leads me to this. Sometimes the things that we go through, those broken places in our lives, those broken areas, those lines that seem to curve, or those ends that never seem to meet up in our lives, those dreams that seem to escape us, it has nothing to do with us. Well, let me retract that. It plays a dual role. Number one, it's that situation is helping us to grow stronger and wiser naturally, because I think if you keep making the same mistakes, natural mistakes, over and over and over again, and you never realize that that's a problem, it's preventing you from growing and maturing mentally, emotionally, financially. It's preventing you from just progressing in life naturally. So you've got to stop. Some of the things that you go through in life have nothing to do with things of a spiritual nature. It's called life. And it's teaching you, life matures you. The way we think now, I did not think this way when I was 18, 19, 25, 35, 45. No, at 49, I think totally different because of my life experiences. They've made me wiser and they've made me stronger. Those broken areas in my life that I'm like, wait a minute. Or we'll say those areas that were broken in my life, it's like, okay, now wait a minute. The Lord helped me two ways. He helped me naturally to think and work through it. I became wiser. I became stronger naturally. Spiritually, I trusted him more. I learned how to recognize his voice. I learned that some things in life you got to let go. Some people you got to shake the tree. If they fall off, they fall off. Some mentalities, no, this isn't how a child of God thinks. This isn't, it has nothing to do with things of a sinful nature, but there are some things in this life I'm going to do for you. There are some things in this life I'm going to provide you with the funds that are necessary to do what you need to do on your own. So he uses those broken areas and those broken places in our lives to make us wiser and stronger naturally and also spiritually. And you know what? God never wastes anything in our lives. You know, he never wastes anything in our lives. Everything that he gives us, it's to be used. You know, every life experience, positive or negative, it's not a wasted experience. You learn, you grow, you become better. So when these individuals were standing there and they said, you know what, he couldn't keep him from, he could open people's eyes, but he couldn't let this man not die. That's like comparing apples to oranges. I know some blind people who are totally spiritually dead, and they're every part of them, they're alive, but they're dead. So this was like comparing apple to oranges, but that's an indication again that he was there so that these other people would be able to experience God and be able to know that he was in fact sent by God and from God to do the work and the will of God. They needed to, that was what was taking place. The death of Lazarus was more about winning and drawing other people to the event with the intentions of them being spiritually restored back to God. And I think if we start focusing our attentions on the negative aspects of our situations, when we start focusing the attention less on how we feel and what's going to happen, if we focus the attention and pray prayers that, you know what, Lord, I thank you because when you bring me through this, other people are going to be won and restored back to you through me overcoming this situation, through you working this situation out in my life. It's to the point, Lord, where I know everybody sees me. I know everybody knows what's going on, but I thank you. I trust you and I believe you. And when I get through this, it's going to be a testimony of your power. It's going to be I will be a physical representation of what you do and how you work through everyday individuals, how you manifest your power in their lives to help others. So that's what these people were on the verge of seeing. Verse 38, then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave and a stone was lying against it. Remove the stone, Jesus said. Now, after Mary and Martha have said, if you would have been here, now look at what Jesus has got to do, Mr. Cameron, to get his job done. He's got to sift through the believer, the antics and the verbal attack of the believer. I know this is going to sound really mean, but I think it needs to be said. Sometimes those who are on the Lord's side, sometimes they attack you harder than those who are not. Okay, church people are some of the most. It's almost like what is it? The Roman gladiators, the amphitheater. If we're not careful, we'll turn church into an amphitheater, a Roman Coliseum. And when somebody comes down and they want to do better, they want to be better, when somebody delivers the word, we'll be off with their head, picking up rocks, and again, I am all for church attendance. So I'm not speaking against church attendance, pastors, leaders, etc. I'm not speaking against that. I think that is an integral part of our spiritual walk with Christ. So I do encourage regular church attendance. But what I'm saying is, if you find yourself leaning, like we said on last week, if the majority of your decisions are based on what other people tell you to do, and you have not in all your ways acknowledged the Lord, from the book of Proverbs, if you have not acknowledged him, then you're going to find yourself running like the hamster on a hamster wheel, just running, just doing whatever. The Spirit of the Lord told me to tell you this. The Spirit of the Lord told me to. Well, why does he need a middleman? Jesus is our middleman. And sometimes I do believe that the Lord will touch someone's heart to they'll say something to you. He'll use that person when you are confused, when you need that connection with humanity to know that, wait a minute, this is what God is saying to me spiritually. If you can't recognize his voice, then I do believe that he will use individuals to come and share a word of knowledge, a word of understanding, etc. So I'm not speaking against that. But what I'm saying is, like this individual, like this man, or the people in the crowd, when Jesus went to the tomb, and he said, wait a minute, he was moved. He said, hey, he went to the tomb and he said, wait a minute, roll the stone away, or move the stone. He was moved because it's like, now I'm not Jesus, but I'm just going to tell you what I thought even as a kid whenever I read this passage. You mean to tell me, some of y'all looking at me, I fed you. I had 2 fish, 5 loaves. You ate some of the fish and the chips. You took home some extra fish with you. You didn't, when they took the baskets up, you got a little extra. Some of you people were there when I healed when I healed, when I raised, when I healed, and the woman with the issue of blood. And when you say to me, okay, he can open blinded eyes, then I have power to get involved in man's life. But now, instead of being in this situation, now that we're in this situation where you see it's hopeless and you feel physically or naturally that it's hopeless, you want to turn the people around you. You want to change their mentality and make it seem like it's truly helpless and hopeless, And those were the people. They'd already been a witness. They'd been witnesses of his power. If they're saying he could open a blind man's eyes, so they saw him in action. So why would they get to that point where if he did that, wasn't anybody else opening blinded eyes? That should have been enough. People in the crowd that saw that should have been there like, wait a minute, I believe he can do it. I'm going up here to get my Cheerios. I'm going wherever he going. I want to see this. He might be able to do that. But instead, they're trying to incite the crowd. How he can't, why can't he do that? If he can do that and he can't do that. And if we're not careful, we'll fall victim to that. We will spiritually fall victim to turning Jesus into like Missouri. Isn't that the show me state? Yeah, you got to show me. I'll believe it when I see it. Well, some things you will never see because you don't believe. You don't believe that they can happen. So because you've already conditioned yourself to believe that it can't happen, you may never see it. So Jesus goes to the tomb and he says, remove the stone. And look at what Martha says. Martha said, wait a minute. Now Martha was his sister. Martha steps up and she says, well, wait a minute, Lord. He's real good and dead. He's been dead for 4 days. So he probably has a serious odor because his body is decomposing. Because she said, wait a minute, he's been dead for 4 days. Now there was a reason, Mr. Cameron. I know you raised up. You want to hear this reason. The reason, I believe, she said, wait a minute. I believe the reason she opposed was because they were Jewish people. They were not to, once a person died, they were not to touch the dead. After that, there were only certain people who could prepare the bodies, like undertaker type people. They were the only people who could touch the body because Jesus couldn't touch a dead man. He couldn't touch dead things. So it was possible that if Jesus would have came on the second day and Lazarus was they said he was dead, well, you know what? There would always be a naysayer that said, well, you know what? He was just he just fell into a coma, or he just woke up. He wasn't really dead. He was just in between life and death. He was in limbo. So he really didn't raise him from the dead because he'd only been dead for a day. He'd only been dead for 2 days. Okay. Day 3. Well, you know what? He'd only been dead, he'd only been dead for 3 days anyway. Now, the reason she yelled out 4 days is because in the ancient world, it actually, not only in the ancient world, but up until maybe like the the 17th or 18th century in some of those, some foreign countries, the doctors and the rabbis, they would not certify a person as legally dead until after 3 days. By the fourth day, that person, they're certified as legally dead, because their comas, just like somebody goes into a coma right now. Some people were in comas and they would just kind of wake up and they would realize, wait a minute, this person was not dead. They were just in like a comatose type state. So doctors, from a natural standpoint, and rabbis, from a natural standpoint, the person was not declared officially dead until after 3 days. Day number 3, you are certified as at a certain time of day 3, you were certified as officially dead. So look at what Jesus did. Jesus wanted Lazarus to be real good and dead. He wanted everybody's mentality to think this man is real good and dead. So he shows up on day 4. And when he shows up on day 4, it is in their eyes a hopeless, helpless situation, which leads me to the question of, what do you do when you find yourself in a hopeless or helpless type of situation? Do you play the blame game like those in the crowd? Do you play the blame game like Mary and Martha? If you would have been here, this would not have happened. If you would have done this, this would not. Do you do that? Okay, because if you do that, then what you do is you in your own way, you set the tone for how God is going to operate in your life. What kind of God wants to operate at the whim and at the wording of a mere mortal? What God, and I only believe there's one God, but some people around here thinking that there's like 20 or 30 of them. But what God would want to know, okay, be at the beck and call of a mere mortal who he was sent here to assist and help? Who would want? I'm glad I wasn't Jesus, Mr. Cameron, because I would have been like, I would have been snatching breath from people who are, he opened a blind man eyes. You know what? Go join him. Go be with him. He mean that much to you. Bleep, you dead, gone. So that's just me. But no, I wouldn't be that way, because I'm sure my mentality would be more compassionate towards. I'd show more compassion towards humanity. But like we said, when you start going through stuff, who do you blame when you feel like hope is lost? Who do you blame? Stop blaming people. Walk away from that, because again, he showed up on day 4, and look at what Martha did. Martha stopped in to interrupt the miracle. Well, now wait a minute, hold on. I know who you are. I know what you said you're gonna do, but this is what the physical situation is. Don't you know people like that, Mr. Cameraman? Have you ever had your hopes up here, and then you talk to somebody, you share your dreams, your aspirations, your goals, and it's like they basically do this, and you're telling that person because you thought, if anybody's going to believe in me, if anybody's going to trust me and encourage me, it's going to be this person, and this person pulls a Martha. Well, he real good and dead. No, it ain't gonna happen like that. No. Now, I do believe God puts people in our lives who are also going to function as the voice of reason. All right. Now, if I stood up here and I said, Mr. Cameron, I've been thinking about joining that Miss America pageant. You know what Mr. Cameron would say to me? He said, well, Lori, because he's from Wisconsin, that's how he talked. He'd say, well, Lori, I believe that you can do that. You can do anything that you want to do. But you might ought to check into the Mrs. America pageant, and then you want to check out the age guidelines. Now, I'm not trying to offend you, because that's how he thinks. That's the voice of reason. Notice, if my hopes he didn't dash my hopes. He added that element of constructive reality to let me know you're not a miss, you're married. Okay. And number 2, you're not, those girls are 22, 23. You 49, you will not win, okay? just based on, you're not going to win. So that's what I'm saying. Who do you surround yourself by? Because if you're going to blame everybody, don't be like going back to the lesson on last week. Don't be around be satisfied around dysfunctional people. Don't be satisfied being around people who constantly point the finger and blaming everybody. And it's your fault because this happened. It's your fault because, and now you can't do that. Why can't I do that? Well, it's never been done. Well, all the more reason for me to be the first to do it. Well, why? Well, you know what? And Mr. Cameron's always these people. Well, when I tried it and I did this and I did that, growing up, and I really wish my father, the late Reverend Andrew Stimson, would be here to attest. He and Eularia Rayson Stimson would be here to attest to what I'm about to say. When my parents taught us to, when you shared with people what you wanted to do, and they shared all the reasons why it wouldn't work, you be nice to the people. You thank them for their input, but you be sure to ask them and get a good understanding before you left. Have you ever tried this before? And if they have not tried it, then you toss whatever they said. You just educate your brain. You toss that to the wind, and you go find somebody who tried it, even if they weren't successful, because that's the person who's going to be more valuable to you than the person who's trying to just give you a bunch of opinion. You don't need opinion. And that's what we're saying when it comes to the Lord. You don't need opinion when you are trusting and believing in the Lord. When the situation seems hopeless, when you're at your 4-day experience, you don't need people in your crowd, on your team, telling you why it can't be done. You need people on your team explaining to you, giving you alternatives. Okay, well, you know what? Well, when it happens, if it happens, what are you going to do about this? That's different than, man, yeah, you might as well give that up. Miss Cameron tell you, you know what? I've had the cameraman being the anchor man for ESPN. I put him on ESPN. Well, that seems like that's kind of dying out, that network, huh? They're going through some technical difficulties. I put Mr. Cameraman, I've tried to hype the cameraman up so to where he's like the guy who passed away from cancer. Remember Mr. Cameraman said, you should apply for that. Mm-hmm. Those are the kind of people you want on your team. In my mind, Mr. Cameron, if he just showed up, all he needs is a suit, and he could sit up there with Barkley. He could sit up there and go toe-to-toe with him. Not on the basketball court, but in like a studio setting, war of words. Those are the kind of people you need on your team. Because those are the people that if you came and said, if he said, well, hey, what do you think about this? All I can do is just give my advice. But you know what? He would find people who did that, if that's something that he really felt compelled to do. What he doesn't need to do is, if he came and said, you know what, Laurie, I've been thinking about trying out for the ESPN radio show or the NCAA announcing show. Okay, he doesn't need me to say, well, you know what, where is that? In New York. Oh, I wouldn't want to live in New York. New York is horrible. And this, Laurie, have you ever been in New York? No, I'm just saying. Whenever somebody says, I'm just saying, that nullifies the whole conversation. Just say, oh, okay, well, all right, move on. So when Jesus gets to the tomb and he sees that, he sees, you know what? They don't believe this can happen. The people in Lazarus' circle was trying to stop Lazarus in their own little way. Even though he didn't know it, they were trying to stop him from walking in and doing what God wanted to, how God wanted to operate in his life. And you know what? Sometimes when we know that Jesus can do something and we and it feels like he's choosing not to do it, it only makes us it only increases the anguish and the hurt and the disappointment that we feel. And it creates like a crisis of hopelessness. It creates that. And look at what Jesus said. Jesus said to her, did not tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God. Now notice Lazarus being raised from the dead, that's not really going to be what he's referring to as the glory of God, because Lazarus was going to die anyway. But what he was saying to her was, if you believe, I'm going to show you, you're going to see the glory of God operating through God, through me, Jesus Christ, God the Son, so that this man will live. So he was saying to her, didn't I tell you, if you just believed in me, it's going to happen and you're going to see the glory of God. But you know what? She wasn't the only person that was going to be able to see that. Other people would see the power of God operating in the Lamb of God, the Son of God, to make life better. So look at what happens between verses 41 and 44. They removed the stone, and look at what Jesus did before Lazarus even came out. The prayer that he prayed is beautiful, and I pray that you will be able to read it in the KJV Bible, because it is absolutely beautiful. That prayer, the Lord's Prayer, and the prayer of Moses, or the blessing of prayer of Moses, they're beautiful, because Jesus, before he said anything to Lazarus, he began to thank God the Father for hearing him. And he thanked him for the miracle that was about to take place even before it took place. So that was powerful. He thanked him. He didn't yell out, Lazarus, come on out here. Praise him. Praise him. He didn't do that. He said, Lord, Father, I thank you for hearing me. I thank you for this situation working out. And I thank you that you always hear me. And because you always hear me, and because you are with me, this crowd around me is going to now believe that you have sent me. So in your hopeless, helpless situation, you know what? It's never about just you. It's bigger than that. And we know what happens at the end when he shouts out, Lazarus, come forth. Lazarus has no other choice than to come out. He has to be released from death. And you know what? Then what does Jesus say? Jesus says to them, loose him and let him go, like unwrap him. Jesus still isn't touching him. He uses the power of the spoken word. And you know what? That's what I want to end with. When you feel like you are in a hopeless, helpless situation, be it spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, or financially, use the power of the word of God. Thank the Lord for seeing, I see my way out of this. Lord, I'm praying to you. I know that you hear me. I know that you are going to get me through this. So I thank you for what you're doing for me. I thank you for where you're taking my life. But Lord, I thank you because the people that I interact with, the people who see me in this situation, they're going to see your glory. The glory of God is going to manifest itself in my life, in this situation, and they are going to be restored. As a result, they're going to be restored back to you. Well, you know what? He's held up that number. It says number 1 lets me know 1 minute. So in my last minute, be sure to check us out on YouTube. Please subscribe to the channel. My goal for March is 20 new subscribers. Come on, even if you need to just click it. Okay, the cameraman laughed at that. That's my goal for this month. Join us tonight at La Madeleine's 5 to 6:30. I know it said 5:30 to 6:30, but they were enjoying it so much they asked me to add an additional 30 minutes. So 5 to 6:30, 1 drink, 1 dessert free. You buy the salad and sandwich on your own. But as we always say, if you have Christ, you're already a winner. If you have the Spirit of the living God, you can face any challenge life throws your way. You can live a victorious life. God bless you.
I know who I'm living for. I know